Hello and welcome to this screencast of the web application FoodMe with me, Anton, and my partner Oskar. FoodMe is a mean stack application which lets you find food recipes in an easy and fun way. The application was developed during the course TDDD27 at Linköping University. And for this screencast, we will first show you a bit of our web application and how far we've come. Then we will talk a little bit about the frameworks used during the development process, and then we will talk about some problems and how we solve them. So this is the front page, and this front page lets you choose what kind of food you're looking for. But first we will log in, which we will do up here. And we will register a user. So Anton, my email is anton@gmail.com, and my password alright. So there we can see that we have logged in when we created our user. So as I said, this is the front page which let us choose what kind of food we want. So let's say I'm looking for French food or Indian food or Italian food. And then we will move on while pressing this button. And this shows us recipes which will generate recipes randomly from our database, which is a MongoDB. And here we can either choose to put it in the cart, which you can see is empty right now. So I can either say, no, I don't want that. And then here is a kladdkaka. We can see a little short description here, but if we want to, we can press the image and we can get some more information about this recipe. And here you can see all the ingredients and the instructions for this recipe. And yeah, you can expand these or make them smaller if you want. Let's say I want this. I press the green button. It has been added to the cart, which you can see here as well. Right, we have also added some animations with Hammer.js, so I can show it to you. And let's say I don't want this recipe. I could just swipe it to the left. And if I'd like to add this recipe to the cart, I can just swipe the other way, like that. And this obviously works better on a mobile device. To look in the cart what I have, you can press this button. So these are the recipes that I have chosen. I can check on all the ingredients, like this. And this just lists all the ingredients for all chosen recipes. As you can see here. And another thing you can do, you can add recipes for others to enjoy. So let's say I'll create a recipe. I can here, Anton's favorite soup. Nice soup. Right. And here are the ingredients. Let's say it's onions, water, and tomatoes. And instructions are obviously for how you're supposed to make the dish. So first, mash everything. He will choose what kind of cuisine this is. I think this is a typical Chinese dish. And let's select an image for this dish. Anton soup. Sounds great. Here we go. And let's create this recipe. And yes, it was created successfully. And let's say I want to find my recipe. I'll just select the Chinese type of food. And this is the recipe I want, so I'll just swipe this to the cart. Like that. And yes, this is basically the application for now. And a future development is to integrate this with an online grocery store like, for example, Mathem. Maybe you could view all your recipes, view all the ingredients, see the prices for all the ingredients, add or remove ingredients, and then finally make the actual purchase for your chosen recipes. For now, the make purchase only empties the cart for you to start all over. But this is it for now, and now let's discuss our used frameworks.
So, as Anton mentioned before, we have developed a mean stack application using MongoDB for the database, Express as a framework for Node, Angular in the front end, and Node in the back end. The Angular client was generated using the CLI and is currently up to date with the latest version 6. Together with Angular, we also used some third-party libraries for design, including both Angular Material and Angular Flex Layout to make the application look a little bit nicer. And the backend works as a simple REST API using Node and Express, and we're also using Mongoose for data modeling and connecting to the database, which is a MongoDB hosted on MongoDB Atlas on an AWS server. As for deployment of the client and the server, the client, Angular client, is hosted on Firebase. With Firebase, we have also used their authentication service to handle passwords and to authenticate tokens both in the client and in the server. The backend is hosted on Google App Engine and is also live. For continuous integration, we are using Travis CI, which auto-deploys both the backend and the frontend when we push to the master branch. Okay, so let's move on to problems and how we solve those problems. And the first problem we came across was to set up this whole communication flow all the way from the database to the client and back to the database again. To show how we solve this problem, let's take a look at an example. Here we have a component in the front end, and this is the detailed recipe component that shows the recipe details. This component needs a recipe from the database. The component uses the recipe service to get a recipe by the ID. The recipe service have most of the basic CRUD functionality. You can get recipes, get recipe ID, add recipes, and also get random recipes for swipe functionality. As we can see here, the recipe service extends object service, which is a generic service that we decided to create to handle all the basic CRUD functionality. So we have all these standard HTTP calls. So we only have to declare these functions at one place in the code instead of each service. So every service will extend this generic service. In our example, we have the recipe service and we use the method getRecipeById, and this will just return the object from the function getObjectById in the object service. So this will send the request to the backend and will end up here in the route for recipes. We will here end up in this code block, and we will now use Mongoose. Recipe is a Mongoose schema which has the find one, and we can query it by ID, and in this case we also want to populate the object with the corresponding queue scenes. Another problem we came across was authentication, where we decided to use Firebase authentication to handle the authentication functionality. And this resulted in an authentication service in the front end, where we use Angular FireOuth to get methods for the basic authentication functions such as Google login, Facebook login with email, and create new users with email. However, we wanted to store some user data in our own database. So once the user successfully logged in or registers, we use the function update user data or create user that takes the user data provided from Angular FireOuth, and we create our own user object and then stores it in the database using the user service, which as well extends the object service that we talked about earlier. So with all this set up, we also wanted to add some security in the backend. And to do this, we added a middleware called checkauth, which gets the authorization header, which is sent from the front end, and then we use the Firebase auth method to verify this token to make sure that the token is valid in our application. And more importantly, we can also extract the user ID from the current logged in user. And this can then be used to make checks later on in the routes. And an example is here in the recipe post method, where we include this middleware to make sure that you have to first of all be logged in to create a recipe, and then we make sure that in the recipe you add the user ID property of that recipe also matches your user ID from your token. In conclusion, we have learned a lot developing this product. And we are also enjoyed working with the main stack, and the different components have worked great together. Hope you have enjoyed this screencast, and thank you for watching.